Welcome to Modern Chat Network. Today, we're jumping into a really complex and fascinating day of news coming out of Zimbabwe. We're going to look at stories about political power, legal drama, and just raw human desperation that together really paint a vivid picture of the nation right now.
Okay, so let's get right into it. We're talking about a controversial plan to keep the president in office way past his term limit. We're also going to look at a justice system that's under a pretty intense microscope. And we'll get into the very human and sometimes just bizarre stories that are happening behind all those big headlines.
All right, our first story takes us right to the top, to the highest office in the land. The ruling ZANU-PF party has kicked off a plan to extend President Emmerson Mnangagwa's time in power, and it's stirring up some serious fears of a slide back into the authoritarianism of the past.
So here's the deal. Zimbabwe's current constitution, which was put in place back in 2013, is crystal clear. A president can serve 2 5-year terms. That's it. But the ruling party is pushing to amend that very rule. If they succeed, it would let the 83-year-old President Mnangagwa sidestep the limit and potentially stay in charge all the way until 2030.
As you can probably guess, this whole proposal has lit a fire under the opposition. Critics, like the well-known lawyer Tendai Biti, are calling it a full-blown constitutional crisis. For a lot of people in Zimbabwe, this feels like a giant step backward, and it brings up bad memories of Robert Mugabe's long rule. He was in power for 30 years before he was finally pushed out in 2017.
Now, changing the constitution isn't exactly a simple process, and this is where it gets really interesting. First, the plan needs to get a 2/3 majority vote in both the upper and lower houses of parliament. But even if it passes there, it's not a done deal. The final and most crucial step is a national referendum. That means the ultimate decision actually rests with the people of Zimbabwe.
Okay, so from the politicians, let's shift gears and head over to the courts, because the justice system itself is making headlines for some, well, truly extraordinary reasons, and it's making people ask some tough questions about competence and fairness.
You just don't hear this every day. In what is a pretty stunning judgment, the High Court has actually barred a magistrate from overseeing any criminal trials. And the reason? They called it profound judicial incompetence. Specifically, she just wasn't proficient enough in English. You see, Zimbabwe's legal system is based on common law, a holdover from its colonial past, so English is the official language in the courts. The judges said her written decisions were so incoherent and lacked any analytical rigor that a fair trial was basically impossible.
And while some parts of the judiciary are grappling with basic competence, the courts are also trying to navigate these incredibly complicated disputes. For example, there's a case over a nearly $500,000 claim for improvements made to a farm. In another, a woman who gave 31 years to one company is now fighting for the Ford Everest she was promised as a retirement benefit, a case that just got kicked from the High Court down to the Labor Court.
So, let's move from the high courts down to the streets, where the pressures of daily life and the tough economy can lead people to make some really desperate choices. It's a whole different kind of justice at play here. Now, to understand this next story, you have to know about this cultural concept called fadzamajamai. It's a term in the Shona language, and it basically means there's this pressure to please your partner, usually by buying them gifts or providing for them. Well, in this story, a university student allegedly took that pressure to a very dangerous extreme. This 22-year-old student, Panashe Nyakwima, is accused of stealing a pistol from his landlord. And that single decision kicked off a chain reaction that has completely changed his life. So what did he do with that stolen pistol? He allegedly used it to commit an armed robbery at a pharmacy. And the whole reason for this life-altering crime? He used the money to buy his girlfriend groceries. His attempt at fadzamajamai went horribly wrong, because if he's convicted of armed robbery, he's looking at a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years in prison. Now talk about a complete 180. We go from a student allegedly robbing a store for grocery money to our next story, which is all about enormous sums of cash being gifted by one of Zimbabwe's most controversial businessmen. It really makes you think about wealth, influence, and where that money comes from.
That's the amount of money we're talking about, $150,000 US. And this wasn't a wire transfer. Businessman Wicknell Chivayo gifted this amount in cash to a popular comedian. So, why the huge gift? Well, Chivayo's official reason was that the comedian had made President Mnangagwa laugh. He called it a small token of appreciation and basically said, if you make the president happy, you make me happy. He then told the comedian to go buy a house with the money.
But, and this is a really big but, All of this generosity is happening under a very dark cloud. Chivayo is known for giving away cars and cash, but he's also a deeply controversial figure. He's been named in a corruption dossier and is facing serious allegations of siphoning off state funds through shady government contracts, which puts a pretty troubling spin on his public gift-giving.
Okay, for our last section, let's zoom out. No country exists in a vacuum. To really get the full picture of what's happening in Zimbabwe, it helps to see what's going on right next door.
When you look around the region, you see these same themes popping up again and again. In South Africa, there's an immigration crackdown because of a jobs crisis. Over in Madagascar, there's a huge fight over citizenship and power after a military takeover. And in Cameroon, a 92-year-old president just won a very contentious 8th term, which has led to deadly protests. So these struggles over power and stability, they are definitely not unique to Zimbabwe.
So what does this all add up to? Well, a single day of news shows us a nation of just extreme contrasts, right? It's a place where the fate of the Constitution is being debated in the halls of power, while on the street, a student might be risking a decade behind bars just for some groceries. It's a country where incredible and questionable wealth is just flaunted openly, maybe even fueling the very desperation that exists right alongside it.
If you found this breakdown insightful, please do us a huge favor and like, share, and subscribe. It really does help us continue to bring you these explainers. Thanks so much for watching, bye-bye, and we'll see you on the next one.